Hello and welcome back to Let's Unpack That. It's a podcast where we two college graduates analyze books that we read in middle school from literary and socio-political perspectives. I'm Lydia.
And I'm quarantined. How are you?
I'm also quarantined, although I'm expecting a distance delivery of cookies in the next hour or two.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Yes.
I'm not super quarantined. I just went out and bought food for everybody because no one in the family felt like cooking, and I felt like leaving the house because I hadn't in 4 days. So, yeah, I'm Nina, and if you're wondering where the heck we've been, turn on the news and see that there is something going on. Many things, well, mostly one big thing. And our life has been kind of thrown into chaos because of it. Also, not to mention the fact that I was going into a new job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But this is our COVID episode.
Yikes. Yeah, it was going on last time we recorded, but we weren't under lockdown last time we recorded.
It was more like a distant, laughable memory. Ah.
Naive, pre-pandemic us. Those were the days.
They were happier then.
Back when I had a job. Wow. Also, yeah. Ooh, I don't have a job anymore. Cool.
Hey, time to start that Patreon.
Maybe, and like I hate to bring this up right now, but you do owe me $72 for the Spotify, the SoundCloud thing.
Oh, I do? Okay.
Yeah, but I'm not going to include that in the podcast. I just haven't found a good time to mention it.
You can keep it in. You can keep it in because now you have proof, and now the whole world will have proof, and now you'll have to hold me to it. So keep it in. Why not?
Pulling out the receipts.
Yeah. Have you learned anything about yourself during this time, Lydia?
I mean, nothing that I didn't really already know, which is that I'm a lonely bitch.
Oh, I've learned that my constant anxiety has really prepared me for a global pandemic, believe it or not. I'm doing quite well.
I think the first 2 weeks were like panic mode because it was like, oh God, this is really happening. We can't do anything. We can't go out. And then after that, it was just, well, shit, why are we still in this? And we're still in this because it's necessary. I recognize that. I'm still doing it. I'm staying home, doing all the stuff that you should also be doing. But also, like, I had a job still for the first 2 weeks of the quarantine, and I don't
Those
now.
long forgotten days.
And yeah, so now my days are fraught and filled with less productivity than I would wish. But I mean, hey, I did finish writing a short story today, and I think it's good.
Woohoo!
So that's progress. I've also done like 2.5 chapters of my second draft of my novel.
And you have become TikTok famous. Hey, everybody, follow Lydia on TikTok.
Yeah. So, like every other basic bitch, I decided to make sourdough bread during quarantine. So because I was sick of not participating in TikTok, just watching the TikToks that remind me of Vine compilations on YouTube, I joined TikTok. And I recorded my sourdough journey on TikTok. And now I have like 2,300 followers on TikTok. So,
follow, like, and subscribe.
Yeah, that's at Literary Lids on TikTok. There are millennials on TikTok. They're all just like 25 and over.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird gap.
Yeah, that's okay.
I have only found a couple people actually my age. It's like, okay.
Are you technically a millennial? Because you were born in 96, right?
I don't know, and I plan to make a TikTok about that.
Okay.
Because, like, we've discussed this before, but 96 is the line that the Pew Research Center draws. But also 95 is the line that a lot of people draw. But also, like, I think the quota for it is, do you remember 9/11? Or not do you remember 9/11? Do you remember life before 9/11?
Yes.
And, like, I remember 9/11. And I have memories from before then, but they aren't about the world. They're about my very specific life.
I think I remember going to a voting place with my dad when I was very, very small. And I'm pretty sure it was before 9/11. So
I remember going to Texas and getting bitten by a red ant.
Oh, that's fun. But
I'm not sure if that was pre or post, because I don't remember the airport security if it happened.
Well, I guess we'll never know.
Anyway, I'm going to take a mass poll. Email us at doitforthevamps@gmail.com and tell me if I'm a millennial, because I can't label myself.
So we will let other people label her. Thank you for participating.
Yes, thank you for participating in this mass survey, and I appreciate your input. We have gotten 0 emails, you know that?
Yeah, that's fine. You guys are all
There's
fuckers.
a single email in our inbox, and it is welcome to Gmail.
Yeah. Well, it's fine. At least we have the Google Drive space.
Yes, and that is going to be key in the next couple of months.
Probably like now.
Yeah, actually now,
Google's
because
yelling at me to
Gmail
buy
keeps.
space.
Me too. It keeps sending me emails, and it's like you'll no longer be able to send or receive emails. It's like, why do you keep sending me emails then?
Because they're trying to get you to pay for it.
Well, I just did a massive purge of my email, so joke's on you, Google.
Haha.
I'm not paying for anything.
I've discovered I'm a lot more social than I realized because, well, first of all, I haven't really been able to see my boyfriend, and then I haven't been going to the office, which I'm still blessed to have my job, but working in my basement, which is where I currently am located. So I just have, me, myself, and I to socialize with, and my dog. And I have friends who are going through shit aside from the COVID-19. And my response is usually, let's go get a drink. Let's go get fucked. Let's grab a, margarita and some tacos and let's talk. And I can do none of that and I miss it. So I'm slightly somewhat more social than I realized, but also, loving being able to just be home and take care of my dog and do my laundry and have time to do whatever for a while. Cleaned out my car the other day. That was great.
Ah, I need to do that.
It's a good feeling. I can recommend a great hand vacuum. Insert segue here.
Yeah, insert segue here. Today we're talking about the Hunger Games, which, if we're not
Hey.
careful, is going to happen soon. But today we're talking about chapters 17 and 18 of the Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. Do you want to summarize chapter 17?
I absolutely would love to. Thanks, Lydia.
All right.
So, in chapter 17, in all seriousness, though, we left off with Katniss blowing up or starting to blow up the careers little pyramid of all of their supplies that they had gotten out of the cornucopia and had protected using the reactivated landmines that the District 3 boy had reactivated. So she shoots an arrow, catches on a bag of apples, and sets them loose, and one of the apples touches one of the reactivated landmines. The force of the explosion throws Katniss backwards. She's dizzy, disoriented, and deaf. One of her ears is bleeding, and she crawls back to the trees just in time for the careers to return and see their destroyed pyramid of supplies. Cato kills the boy from District 3, and then the careers assume that whomever destroyed their supplies must be dead, but when the anthem plays that night, they learn that's not the case. Katniss also sleeps in her hiding spot and wakes to see Foxface laughing in the burnt pyramid, dancing in the ashes like a goth queen, and Katniss considers allying with her but thinks better of it, and she makes her way back to the stream to wash away her blood and finds that she's still deaf in her left ear, though her hearing is slowly returning. She reaches the place where she's supposed to meet Rue and waits for her in a tree. When Rue doesn't show up, Katniss goes to the third fire and finds that it was unlit. Remember that they were setting different fires to distract the careers and bring them away from their cornucopia stash. So because she finds the third fire unlit, she decides to retrace Rue's steps and then hears her scream. She finds Rue tangled in a net, and then the worst. She watches a spear pierce her abdomen. Oh boy.
Yeah,
Oh boy.
these 2 chapters are heavy.
Yeah. I would argue they're the pivotal moments.
Yeah. So victory. Katniss has destroyed the food. We begin with a big victory for her, and then end with the most devastating scene in the entire series. Here's what I thought of this at first. First, how do explosions work?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know that personally, and it's something that I hear all the time when people talk about movies. It's like, oh, the explosions don't really work like that in real life. It's like, then how do they work? Because that's a very movie physics explosion that we hear described in the book. So I looked it up, and it turns out the blast wind from an explosion can really move a person several meters. There's lots of air pressure changing during an explosion, so there's a sudden change when the air is blasted outward, and then a sudden rush of air into that vacuum that's created by the explosion. actually, in the case of an explosion that throws a person backwards, it can be more damaging to the internal organs than it appears on the outside. An explosion like this can cause hemorrhaging, especially in air-filled organs like your lungs, ears, and stomach. And I got that from an article on Gizmodo. So we know that Katniss is deaf right now, but I mean, she could also have a lot of internal damage too that we don't know yet because she doesn't like notice it. Maybe eventually she will.
I love how, even in this moment of being blown up, almost literally, she comes back to the camera is on me and I need to work this. So she's not going to show that she's afraid or disoriented or anything like that. She's like, nope, okay, keep going. Everyone's watching me. She is the politics queen. And never tell me that Katniss isn't inherently a political character, because she is working the angles. She knows what she has to do to appear likable. She knows what she has to do to appear in control. And she knows what she has to do to look appealing to the people who are betting on her in the Capitol. I love it.
I noticed during these couple of chapters, or really during her entire time in the arena, she really goes between thinking of Prim watching her through the cameras and somebody else watching her through the cameras. Do you think that she has two different people in mind? Like the Capitol people are one audience and Prim is another audience? Or is she always thinking of Prim when she looks at the cameras?
Oh, I would definitely say she has two people in mind. Sometimes it's both at the same time, and sometimes it's just Prim, and sometimes it's just the Capitol. Like right now, if it were just Prim watching, or if she thought it was just Prim watching, she wouldn't hide her fear, I don't think. I don't think she would work so hard to appear in control, because that's her little sister who knows her. And I don't know if Katniss would feel that same need to really hide herself behind a bravado. Whereas with the Capitol and the people she's assuming are betting on her, she wants to appear a certain way. And I think the way that she wants to appear to the Capitol and Prim are very similar, but they come from different places. So it just ends up being two different points of view that she's aiming for. One being, okay, bet on me, send me supplies, I'm going to win this thing, here we go. And the other one is, no, Prim, I'm not going to I'm not going to not give my best, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I can win, and I'm not going to let you see me suffer, that sort of thing.
With that suffering, I just had an interesting thought, which is that she doesn't want Prim to see her suffer, but at the same time, she knows that the entire reason that the Capitol is watching is to see her suffer.
That is an excellent point. She wants to appear strong to them. But she wants to appear strong in different ways. She wants to appear strong for Prim in like the maternal, I'm going to keep fighting for you because I promised you kind of way. She's going to show that she's strong to the Capitol because she wants them to bet on her and see her favorably, hopefully sponsor her, and just, make sure that she is putting on a show that they are wanting to see and that they're receptive to, so that they'll help support her and potentially help her win.
Yeah, it's so weird. I keep assuming that all of the tributes are watching the games also, but that's not the case. Like, the games are really happening inside of Katniss's head because the audience reactions are happening there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about hearing loss.
Yeah. Go for it. What'd you find out?
Katniss is now permanently deaf in her left ear because of this explosion, and she only ever regains hearing in that ear because of the Capitol's fancy implants that they give her. Now, this isn't going to be the complete discussion of disability in the Hunger Games series, because later Peeta loses his leg, which I totally forgot about because it's not in the movies.
Right.
So I did a little bit of research on hearing loss, and it turns out from the National Institutes of Health website, noise-induced hearing loss can be caused by extremely loud bursts of sound, such as gunshots or explosions, which can rupture the eardrum or damage the bones in the middle ear. This kind of noise-induced hearing loss can be immediate and permanent. As in this case, it's immediate and it's permanent.
Are they saying like the rupturing the eardrum can be permanent and the bones and breaking the bones in the middle ear, or breaking the bones in the middle ear is the one that's more immediate and permanent?
I would say the eardrum is more permanent, but loud noises can cause damage to either or both. I guess it really depends how sensitive your ear is. A noise that deafens one person might not deafen another. it's one of those weird parts of the body that works slightly different in everybody,
Yeah.
which is why the ears are so sensitive. Also said, loud noise exposure can cause tinnitus or tinnitus. I don't know how to pronounce that word. A ringing, buzzing, or roaring in the ears or head. Tinnitus may subside over time, but can sometimes continue constantly or occasionally throughout a person's life, which is, I think, what Katniss is experiencing in the ear that she can hear out of when she's gradually like, okay, not permanently deaf in her right ear, and it starts to come back, but it's with the ringing noise.
Right.
It's a real injury, and it's really going to inhibit Katniss, at least for now, because she feels so unbalanced after
Yeah.
losing hearing, because it's one of her primary senses that she uses to hunt. But that's what's going on with Katniss's ears.
Yeah. And losing her hearing for her is a very big thing. I actually studied American Sign Language in high school, took a couple of classes. And what was great about that class is that we did a lot of research into deaf culture, and that's deaf with a capital D, because there is a culture, and it is very fascinating and interesting and beautiful for those who have never really looked into it. The deaf culture itself is amazing. And I admire it a lot. So we're not trying to go out on a limb here and saying like, oh, losing your hearing is devastating and it's the worst thing that could happen. No, losing your hearing for somebody or being born without hearing is not necessary. It's not a disability. It really isn't. But in Katniss's point of view, the way that she's lived and the way that she has made her living in hunting, losing her hearing here is incredibly devastating for her, because if you have depended on your senses or this particular sense for so long, obviously it's going to be something that's incredibly, she's experiencing it right now. She doesn't really know what's going on. She keeps on thinking, something's wrong with my ear, and then like patting at her ear and trying to figure out just feeling completely off kilter, right?
I'm wondering, why do you say it's not a disability? Because it is literally the loss of an ability or the absence of an ability.
I say it's not a disability because first of all, the deaf community doesn't characterize it as a disability, first and foremost.
Oh.
They don't see themselves as disabled. They just simply can't hear. And I'm speaking as someone who studied them a long time ago, so I'm definitely not the expert, but the community itself, they don't see themselves as disabled. They have full capacity to do most things, and they drive, they have jobs, some of them learn to speak. It's not a disability in the way of they are limited by their loss of hearing. And again, just very generalizing here, a lot of the deaf community doesn't like to be categorized under disabled. You'll even hear people who are very vehemently opposed to being called disabled because they don't feel they are.
I didn't know that.
It's a very complex topic because I could go into a very long yarn about the different people who are like, oh, we should have people having cochlear implants, or no, don't have a cochlear implant, or it's a very, very tricky subject and not something that I feel entirely comfortable divulging into because I have so little experience with it. But the bottom line being is the deaf community, again, capital D, does not feel that they are disabled, and they are able to live healthy and, what we would consider normal lives and be active members of society, even without their hearing. It was something that was very much drilled into me by my high school teacher, hey, Miss Trumbauer, who taught my ASL classes because her son was born deaf. And she was and still is presumably a very big advocate for deaf is not a disability. Here's all the ways that they are, able to succeed and be a part of hearing people society. Like, I just read a book called The Silence Between Us, and it's about a high school girl who went deaf when she was 13, and I think the book takes place when she's 17. So she's been deaf for 4 years at the time of the book. She has grown into her deaf culture, right? And the author who wrote it is hard of hearing as well. Not completely deaf, but hard of hearing. And that book really touches on how complicated a situation can be and how the deaf community can really feel marginalized and made to feel bad for what they consider to be not that big of a deal. It fascinates me. I miss taking sign language, and I wish I had a better way of explaining it, because I feel I am not doing a good job of explaining it, but it's not a disability, and it's interesting to kind of hear people's perspectives on it, because you would think, being hearing, that, oh, how could you live without your hearing? But really, they don't see it as any different. And that book I was reading it's called The Silence Between Us, and it is by Alison Gervais. Gervais. I got it off of Amazon. It's great. I loved it. You should definitely read it, everybody. And if you are interested in learning a little bit more about deaf culture, definitely do so. Highly recommend. Gallaudet University has some cool resources, and yeah, it's neat. It really is its own subculture, and they have their own separate history that I think is just really interesting. So highly recommend looking into it a little bit more. One cool thing to not necessarily read, but look into, is the history of Gallaudet University. It's actually the first deaf liberal arts college. It's in Washington, D.C., and they had a pretty big movement for a deaf president of their college, because for the longest time, the president was a hearing man, and they felt that he couldn't properly represent them. I mean, how could he? So looking into the history of Gallaudet's really cool too. You learn a lot from there.
Nice. Yeah, I didn't know that. When was it founded, and is it still going on?
Yeah, no, it's still it was founded in 1864. It was originally a grammar school for both the deaf and blind children, but now it is a university, a liberal arts university. And it's Gallaudet, like Gallaudet.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's really cool. Back to hearing loss.
Yeah, back to hearing loss. Katniss is partially deaf. She's permanently deaf in one ear, and although she's gradually regaining hearing in the other ear, that adjustment is difficult for her.
Reasonably so.
Yeah, it is a big adjustment, especially for someone who has relied so heavily on their hearing for their entire life.
Yeah. Like I said, for her, it is more of a disability than hearing loss might be considered in today's world, but like, for her, it is a huge loss.
I mean, you spend your entire life learning to do things some certain way, and then all of a sudden you have to change the way you do that because of something that's out of your control. That is difficult.
Exactly.
So she's learning how to hunt in a different way.
Yeah. But I also really like this moment here. You know, she's totally bewildered. She's been literally thrown off her feet and has lost this vital sense of herself. But now on page 226, she finally says, "Let the 74th Hunger Games begin. Let them begin for real." And she's thinking about Cato in this moment. So I love this
Yes. Bring it on. She's into it. Yeah. So throughout this whole journey in the games, we've seen Katniss gradually grow to consider that maybe she has a chance in these games, like how she imagines killing the careers here. And she almost, later in this chapter, looks forward to her confrontation with Cato. But this is, I think, where she has the most hope, because she's the most beaten down that she's been in the games, aside from those 2 days that she was vulnerable to attacks because of the tracker jacker stings. But she's made a solid change in the career's chances of survival, and that is no small thing to her. Like, she knows that she's done a big thing here that hasn't been done in previous games, and that will change the tides of this game. And she's proud of herself. So good for her.
Yeah, absolutely. Like she said, the majority of the time, the careers are the ones who win. But now she's completely flipped that on its side. They're the weak ones instead of everyone else. And so just to clarify then, I guess District 3 isn't a career? I guess it's 1, 2, and 4?
Man, I can't remember what we keep saying because we keep, like, having to correct ourselves. I think it is 1, 2, and 4, because 3 is the technology district.
That's true. Yep.
So it relates less to, like, hunting.
Right.
So can we talk about Foxface for a second?
Yes, we can.
Katniss briefly considers allying herself with Foxface, who is, like we said, kind of dancing in the ashes. But she thinks better of it. She says, "There's something about that sly grin that makes me sure that befriending Foxface would ultimately get me a knife in the back. on page
Oh, I agree.
227. What
Yeah.
is up with Foxface?
She has just been so aloof this whole time, right? Like nobody knows her name, but she also hasn't been, she's been almost like a scavenger, kind of like a fox, where she's been coming in and, now she's taking supplies from their pyramid before it got blown up. And now she's scavenging through them again. But she's been somehow managing to really stay out of the line of fire, and stay under the radar and kind of just slyly move through the woods like a fox who, she hasn't really run into anybody. I think that's part of what makes her dangerous because she's clearly very good at sneaking. She's good at blending in and she's good at, coming in at the opportune moment.
Yeah, and I think we'll have more of an opportunity to talk about her later when she eats the berries and ends up dying, and they didn't even know that Foxface was following them. This is such a weird moment. I don't know. Foxface is just such a weird mystery of a character.
I think that's kind of the point of her character, is to be kind of just weird and mysterious. Definitely.
Yeah, what district is she from again?
Oh, gosh. She's from District 5.
Science.
Their main export is power to the capital,
Oh, okay.
according to the Hunger Games fandom wiki.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at the book, the Panem Companion, and it says the science, DNA, mutations, experimental sciences, extrapolation based on Foxface's game strategy as well as unserved needs of the capital. By the way, I did get a hold of this book called The Panem Companion by V. Arrow, and it's by the person who made the commonly used map of the of Panem, and so it has how she came up with what the districts were, where they were, based on what happens in the series and what we know about. It's pretty cool. I mean, the map in here really puts in perspective how small North America has become. Anyway, back to chapter 17. Yeah, so Katniss gradually recovers and she's on her way back to meet up with Rue.
I keep reading this phrase Rue's copes as Rue's corpse, and either I have spent way too much time reading true crime or this is intentional.
Is it a copes or a cops?
I don't know. I think it's an interesting phrase, or maybe it's just a word that Collins chose, or maybe it's a foreshadowing. But every time I read this, did you feel like that? Did you kind of have to reread that a lot and be like, wait, hang on?
Yeah, and I think for that reason it's definitely on purpose because cops, that's how I was taught to pronounce it. I'm not sure if that's correct either.
I've never been taught to pronounce it.
Episode that we don't know how to pronounce. It's a sign that we've done a lot of reading and not a lot of listening.
Talking.
Audiobooks help with that, but only to a certain extent. But yeah, the similarity between cops and corpse is definitely on purpose and foreshadowing that later there will be Rue's corpse.
Very shortly, in fact.
Yes, very shortly, at the end of this chapter, at the end of next chapter. Strangely, Katniss actually feels relaxed when she gets back to the meeting place. She settles into a tree and she has a break for once. She comments that she feels the most relaxed that she has in a long time. She has time to comb through her hair and redo her braid and pay attention to herself. And it's so weird that throughout this all, she finally gets a break right when everything is about to go down. Probably should tell us that something else is going on in the arena, like somebody else is getting killed or is getting chased by something, but if it gives Katniss a break, then...
But that brings me to my question. What is Rue doing during this time? How long has it been since they've seen each other? Over 24 hours?
Yeah, I think so.
And we learn later on that Rue didn't actually set fire to the third signal fire that she was supposed to. What is she doing now? What's happened to Rue between the time that Katniss has, blown up the stash and then she slept? She was asleep through the night. And then I'm assuming it takes a little bit of time to get back to where their meeting point was. And Rue still hasn't shown up. So that gives us at least, 6-7 hours of not knowing where she is at the least. I don't understand where she could possibly have been in this time. And on page 231, Katniss thinks, maybe she has run into a pack of predators or another tribute. We haven't really seen many predators in the arena, at least not described by Katniss, other than the pack of wild dogs fleeing the forest fire. And certainly none of the deaths of the tributes, as far as we know, have been attributed to an animal attack. That being said, every time I read that, I feel like when Katniss refers to those predators, she's inherently referring to the career pack. And that just might be my feeling there. But, she says predators, I think careers. But that still doesn't really narrow down what is keeping Rue from coming to Katniss. She even says something is keeping her up a tree. I don't know. Do you have any theories about this, about what's going on with Rue at this time? Because it just seems like such a long time for her to be, even if she was being followed or ran into an animal or another tribute, this seems like a lot of time has passed.
Yeah, it is a lot of missing time in Rue's timeline. Since she got caught in the net between the second or third fires, that's where she got caught, correct?
I think so.
Then I would say maybe she got caught in the net before she was able to light the third fire, and she's been trying to get out this entire time. I don't know. That doesn't really
The way
work.
that it was written, though, is it seems like she was just caught, because she was singing that she was okay, and Katniss was hearing the birds, and they were all like, "Yay, everything's fine," and then she hears her scream. I feel like the way that that's written, we're supposed to believe, oh, she was going to meet Katniss at that time, and then she got caught in the net.
I could see it being that she only started screaming when the boy from District 1 got there and noticed her. Because before then, she was caught, but she was still not in any immediate danger.
Maybe.
I don't know.
But would she be so helplessly entangled? The net itself, was she like I think she wasn't up a tree. She was just, the net had like fallen over her. So I don't think she would have been so helplessly entangled that she couldn't get out within a couple of hours.
Yeah, she should have had a knife. She should have been able to get herself out, which does indicate that maybe she got caught in the net right as the boy from District 1 got there.
I always assumed that the boy from District 1 had set the trap.
Yeah, that is likely as well. In that case, still, why wouldn't she have made it to the third fire?
I don't know. I have a theory, and it's probably a little far-fetched, but it's a theory. I think, could it be possible that she ran into Thresh? In the movie, we have a little bit of a sense that they at least knew of each other because Thresh spares Katniss's life and says, just this one time, 12 for Rue, before he runs back off into the woods and is ultimately killed. So maybe drawing on that, maybe Thresh and Rue caught up with one another, and either Rue was hiding from him and spoke to him afterwards, or maybe they didn't speak, or maybe it was something like that. But I don't know. Maybe they were talking and coming up with a plan. Rue would have had to be in that tree for such a long time, the whole time that Katniss was indisposed under the bush after the explosion. So I just don't know what else could have taken her so long to get moving. The third campfire didn't even get lit. I would imagine, okay, she's on her way to light the third campfire and the careers come by. Okay, yeah, so she's up a tree for a couple hours. But after the explosion and after the careers run back to their camp, I don't know. For some reason, the only logical explanation I could think of was she must have run into the other tribute from her district, Thresh. And either she knew him and they briefly spoke and left, or she spent a good amount of time hiding from him. I don't know. To me, that's my theory.
That's a good theory because I was also wondering this because later, I don't know in the book, but in the movie, Thresh saves Katniss's life because of Rue.
Right.
How would he have known that? How would he have known that she was kind to Rue?
Exactly.
And so one solution to that could be that they met up and they talked and Rue was like, Katniss is helping me.
Right, exactly.
So that makes a lot of sense.
That's what I'm going to go with. It's too bad it wasn't expanded on. I would have really liked to know the answer.
I mean, I think once we get to the parts with Thresh, we'll maybe learn more because we'll be able to read into like, okay, how did he know? What exactly was his relationship with Rue? Because he obviously cared for her. I mean, you don't come out of a district like that without having that kind of bond. So maybe he viewed her as a little sister and appreciated that Katniss was also viewing her as a little sister. But maybe we'll find out more later.
And thus we arrive at what I think is the turning point of this entire series. This is the pivotal moment, these next couple pages.
Yes. With Katniss's hope of finding Rue alive and well, we have that immediately dashed as we hear Rue's scream and as Katniss runs into the clearing to see Rue stabbed with a spear. Ugh.
Oh boy.
Brutal. It's brutal.
And then we're at chapter 18.
Chapter 18. Katniss kills the boy from District 1 who threw the spear at Rue. She shoots him in the neck. And then she starts tending to Rue's wound, but quickly realizes it's hopeless. So Rue tells Katniss she has to win the games. Katniss says that she will for both of them, and Rue asks Katniss to sing to her, so she sings an old mountain air from her district, and Rue dies as she finishes the song. Katniss wants to do something to show the Capitol how cruel this all is, and that the tributes are more than pieces in their games, so she decorates Rue's body with wildflowers, she does the three-finger salute to her, and then she walks away. And as she's settling down for the night, she receives a gift of bread from District 11. So she thanks them aloud, just so that they know that they're appreciated, and climbs into a tree for the night. Katniss takes it slow the next day, just waiting for another tribute to show up, almost wishing for a confrontation. And then Claudius Templesmith makes an announcement saying that there has been a rule change, and 2 tributes can win if they're both from the same district. So Katniss instinctively shouts Peeta's name, and that is where the chapter ends. And that's where the part ends.
Yeah.
Because we are now in part 3, the victors, after this chapter.
So reading this, actually, it hit me in a weird way. As I was going back through right before we recorded, on page 233, Katniss says, "There's no point in comforting words telling her she will be all right. She is no fool." And right around now, we're seeing a lot of devastation, a lot of death from this COVID-19 virus. And, my mom is famous for having the news on at all times. So I happened to catch a little bit of an interview with a doctor named Dr. Zeke Emmanuel. He's currently a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and the chair of the Meta Council on the Future of Healthcare Committee for the World Economic Forum. His background is in oncology, so he has treated a lot of people with terminal cancer. And that was something, he's been on the news a lot recently, just kind of giving his opinion. And the interview I happened to catch on him, he was on CNN, and the question that they asked him was, what are we going to do about returning to normal amidst the pandemic? But he mentioned that during his time as an oncologist, he didn't believe in telling people that they would live and filling them with false hope if that wasn't the truth. He recommended to doctors during this time, don't lie to the patients if there isn't any hope, along the lines if it doesn't help anything. And for some reason, that line really stuck with me. And it just kind of seems to fall perfectly into place here with Katniss saying, I'm not going to lie to her and tell her that she's going to live because she's not. Just kind of a weird connection that I picked up on between reading the book and recording the episode. I was like, oh, that's creepy.
Yeah, that is weird. In the case of terminal illnesses, it's a balance between hope and realism, and having to be okay, we're going to do what we can, but also this is your life expectancy and you're probably going to die. And that's a difficult thing to keep in your mind. It's kind of a cognitive dissonance type of thing, to have to think, okay, there is hope, but also I'm going to die. There's a slim chance that I won't, but I probably will. And that's such a devastating thing to think that a 12-year-old is going through in this book. That Rue is thinking, okay, I'm definitely going to die now. Yeah. And that there are so many people who today have to think that because of COVID-19, who have to think, okay, there is hope. Some people have recovered. Some 100-year-old people have recovered, but also limiting that hope with some realism.
Exactly.
That's really hard. And I think that's something that's really hard going on with a lot of people right now, because even though there are 100-year-old people who have recovered, there are 100-year-old people who don't. And
there are 30-year-old people who don't. There are children who haven't.
Right. A couple of weeks ago, the first child died of it in LA. It's a weird thing to have to hold in your mind. And it really, the other day I saw an interview with a 90-something-year-old who recovered from COVID-19. And she was saying the key is hope. The key is not giving up. The key is to believe that you will recover and to hold that in your mind and to believe it with all your heart. And yet there are people out there who have believed that they'll recover and they'll be fine and that everything will go back to normal, and they don't. And it's not a failure of hope that they didn't. It's
chance.
nature. It's just the virus. It's
Yeah.
chance. It's luck. It's access to medical care. It's all of these things. And to reduce survival to hope only is to do a disservice to a lot of people. So by all means, hold hope, but don't let it put you in denial that there are other factors at play.
And don't forget that there are men and women who are working very hard right now to make sure that as many people recover from this virus can. More depressing theories?
Yeah. So that's more complicated thoughts for this time in our lives.
Probably not the best chapter to be reading right about now, but hey, when have we ever had a good idea?
I mean, man, I cried so hard reading this chapter. Like, man, it got me again.
Yeah.
Like, I said it before, I'll say it again. The first time I read it, I cried, and I don't cry reading a lot of books. I cry in a lot of movies, but I don't cry reading a lot of books. And I cried this time reading this chapter like a week ago so hard. Like for 15 solid minutes, I cried over this chapter.
Wow.
I mean, I think part of that is that our world is experiencing a lot of loss right now.
Right.
And since I first read this, I have experienced loss.
Right.
But damn, it got me.
It's harder to fathom the older we get, I think. Like, it hits you harder the older you get because you experience loss and you also think about, I mean, how long ago does it feel to be 12?
It was over 10 years ago for us.
Yeah. So, it's 10 years that Rue wouldn't have experienced, and the older you get, the harder it is to read.
Just so you know, it's getting me again now.
Oh. Oh. You need a minute?
Yeah, I think I do.
Okay.
The following is a brief pause to allow the host to get their shit together. Please take this moment to do the same for yourself. Thank you.
And just thinking, as Rue is dying, she asks Katniss to sing, and Katniss thinks, if this is Prim's, I mean Rue's last request, I have to at least try. That's from page 234. Like, what a slip. Katniss has really come to identify Rue as her sister. Like,
Yeah.
she's
Oh, yeah.
come to really mesh the images of Rue and Prim in her mind, even though, like, physically they're almost opposites. In just a few short days, she's come to love Rue like a sister, and so much that she views Rue as almost what would have happened to Prim if Prim had not had Katniss to volunteer for her.
Yeah.
Which is just heartbreaking. Like,
Do you think Prim would have lasted this long?
I honestly, I don't think so.
Sorry,
because Prim, sorry, Prim. But she doesn't have the hunting skill, and I think she would have gone into it with a lot less of an image than Katniss has gone into it, because she would have been kind of like Rue, another 12-year-old who just is wrecked by the reaping. And so she wouldn't have had as much control over her image, and I don't think that her team would have believed as much in her because of that. I think Prim does have some survival skills, like she knows medicine, she knows medicinal plants, she knows edible plants. So she might have been fine if she had just run away from the cornucopia at the beginning, but...
But we wouldn't have had Haymitch helping her.
Right. Haymitch wouldn't have invested as much time in Prim as he has in Katniss, because Katniss is a survivor. Which also speaks to, like, Rue's team probably didn't invest in her.
Yeah, I have to wonder. They probably didn't.
Yeah, and it's a little bit different with Katniss because Cinna chose her, but I'll bet the team from District 11 didn't choose District 11 because it's another marginalized district that nobody wants.
Yeah.
So Rue has gone through this whole thing without a lot of people rooting for her simply because she's 12. And so that's...
Well, tell us about the book that you got.
Yeah, so I got laid off from the bookstore that I work at.
Boo.
But before I left, I was able to use my employee discount one last time and my store credit one last time.
One last time.
I picked up a book called The Panem Companion by V. Arrow. It's an unofficial guide to Suzanne Collins' Hunger Games, from Malark Bakery to Mockingjays. I expected it to have about the contents of the wiki, but it has a lot more. Like, I'm talking essays about analyzing the sociology and everything and how Panem works and all the districts. There's a chapter that I think you would be interested in that's all about District 4 and the dynamics of Annie and Finnick and her Max. And that was really interesting. But there's a chapter called Mythology and Music in Panem. And since this book does encompass the whole series instead of just the Hunger Games like we're analyzing, it has a lot of perspectives on the rest of the series and the characters in the rest of the series. So in this chapter, there's an analysis of the song The Hanging Tree, which they sing in Mockingjay, and it's like the refrain of the rebellion. But there's a bit about music in general in the series, including music in District 11 and in District 12. So I looked into Appalachian music, since Katniss says that the song that she's singing is a mountain air. So Appalachian music, according to the Wikipedia, is the music of the region of Appalachia in the eastern United States. It is derived from various European and African influences, including English ballads, Irish and Scottish traditional music, especially fiddle music, hymns, and African American blues. First recorded in the 1920s, Appalachian musicians were a key influence on the early development of old-time music, country music, and bluegrass, and were an important part of the American folk music revival of the 1960s. Which is interesting. I didn't know that Appalachian music would have African American influences.
Yeah.
Somehow that didn't occur to me, but apparently it does. And actually the song The Hanging Tree is based somewhat, has echoes of a blues song.
Yeah.
And so Katniss describes the song that she's singing here as easy and soothing, promising tomorrow will be more hopeful than this awful piece of time we call today. That's from page 234. So it's about safety and having everything you need around you and nothing to worry about, which is, ironic considering the arena is the most dangerous place for all of them, and scarcity and violence are what makes the game so awful. But it's basically a blanket of, it's okay now because I love you, even though it's not okay.
Yeah.
Which is a really powerful thing.
Yeah.
It is the perfect balance of having hope when things are not okay.
And it's also kind of promising that Rue won't be forgotten.
Yeah. I'm going to start crying again. But everything is awful. But right now, this can be okay because we're together.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what has made this isolation so difficult for a lot of people, is because we can't come together and say we're okay because we're together.
Yeah. Just talking from another level, maybe not between all of us who have been apart from each other for almost 2 years now, but definitely I wish we could all be in the same room together and comfort each other during this time. If this were some kind of war or some kind of physical conflict, I feel like we would make an effort to come together at some point. And this is just speaking to our friendship group. But we can't. Mm-hmm. And then there are families who are separated from one another. I haven't seen my boyfriend in a long time, and it's, it sounds kind of silly on the surface, where it's like, oh, I can't see my boyfriend, but he really is a source of comfort for me, and he is a source of a lot of grounding and pulls me down from whatever atmosphere I'm in, and just kind of going crazy and being like, I'm all blah, 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 and says like, okay, sit down, you're fine, calm down. And that's the kind of reassurance that I need right now. So personally speaking, it is very hard to be isolated from the people that you love in the time that you're struggling the most. So I see what you're saying here, and I'm trying not to get emotional either.
I think in our friend group, we've had to really learn the value of presence.
Yeah.
Like how we absolutely took for granted all the times when we could just sit in the living room together. And like one of us would be playing Zelda and the other would be working on an essay and another would be working on newspaper stuff. and just being in the same room.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, I'm glad that we've had so much more time to Skype with each other and to Google Hangout and to play D&D and other games together and just talk. But it's still the physical presence that we're still adjusting to, even 2 years after not living together.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, I would be in Colorado with you now if it hadn't been for this pandemic.
Yeah.
Like, I was literally planning to visit this weekend.
We were planning on doing this episode together, like sitting next to each other. So we were like, it's going to be great. It's going to be the saddest one, but it's fine because we'll be together. Just kidding.
Yeah. It's going to be our first episode ever recorded in the same room. And here we are, trapped in our own houses.
Ha!
So, physical presence is very important.
Yeah. As much as we don't want to admit it, us being introverts.
Yeah, as much as introverts, we are sometimes like taught by the labels of like the Myers-Briggs or whatever to think that, oh, we like spending time alone. We don't need people. We don't need to be around people. Like, we do need to be around people still.
Oh, yeah.
Like, even if it's just sitting in the same room and not talking, that is still a valuable form of socialization, and we're not getting it anymore.
Right.
So it's an adjustment that we're all having to make, and it's a worthwhile adjustment, because if it means that we flatten the curve a bit, then it's good. And I'm not saying this at all to complain and be like, I just want to hang out with my friends. I'm not a baby. I know how to not be around my friends. But it is an adjustment that we're all having to make, and the struggle is real.
Yeah. It's a tough time. And this is a tough chapter to be walking through.
Yeah.
Especially now.
But Katniss says it to herself. Rue is safe now.
Yeah.
She's good and safe.
And kind of like how you mentioned when you're doing the summary, this is really when Katniss starts deciding to show the Capitol that she is not just a piece in their games, that she's not just this pig that has been sent to slaughter, and that the kids that are in the arena are more than what they're being portrayed as. I still see these moments as the biggest pivotal moment for the entire series. This is where the Mockingjay is born, even if it doesn't have a name yet.
Yeah.
Katniss decorates Rue's body with wildflowers and does a 3-fingered salute before leaving.
Because she knows that the cameras are going to have to show Rue's body, and that they're going to have to give her to her district like this.
Exactly.
And that the district will see that Rue was valued and loved, and that her death is not without meaning, which I think is really a turning point for Katniss, because before she's been using the cameras as more of a self-promotion thing, like thinking of them in order to motivate herself to get moving, and here she's using the cameras in a way against them. And in this moment, she's reminded of Gale's anger against the Capitol's injustice, and how Peeta said that he wants to show them he's more than a pawn. And the combination of those thoughts, that anger and that just helplessness, makes something beautiful.
Yeah.
So it's a different kind of tribute that she's made here. It's a tribute to the people who have lost so much, and it's not a tribute to the people who have taken it. And then she gets a gift from them, acknowledging that they've heard her, they've seen her, they've appreciated her. And so I think that's really the first alliance that she makes as a Mockingjay.
Yeah. No, this is the moment.
District 11 is ready to fight.
Oh, yeah.
It's the first district that really rebels. And I think that's because Katniss went to them first. And it was this act that did it.
Yeah. It also makes me think that when Katniss was putting the flowers on Rue, that had to be on camera, because it was pretty immediate that she got that gift from District 11. So that leads me to believe, hey, they saw it and then they said, yes, no, we want to send this bread to her.
It makes you wonder exactly what people in Panem are seeing.
Yeah.
I could see why the Capitol would not want everybody to see Katniss doing this act of rebellion, but also maybe that was a tiny rebellion of Seneca Crane.
Yeah.
Deciding to show that. And maybe that was even more than the berries was why he was executed, because he allowed too much hope in.
Right. Exactly.
So then Katniss goes into a depression. She says, heaviness infuses my whole body as if there's liquid lead in my veins. I've lost the will to do simple tasks, to do anything but lie here, staring unblinkingly through the canopy of trees. And that's on page 240. So she can't get out of bed. She has to tell herself to do little things, like step by step. That's depression. Wow.
Yeah. How many days I've spent in that exact headspace. A lot more than I'm willing to admit, particularly in college, which is actually something that makes me really sad now to think about how much I really struggled through college and how bad my mental health was then, because I loved Pepperdine and I loved going to school and I loved being with everybody, but I was really, really having a hard time through most of it. And it makes me wish I had been in a better headspace to really be there and enjoy and be present rather than stuck in my own head like I was for so long. Katniss is already showing that she's developed amazing coping skills, no doubt from her time in District 11 after losing her father and taking care of Prim. You see her going through very basic, tomorrow I will do X. She's giving herself time to grieve. And I think if you've never been in a place where grief or anguish overwhelms you to the point that it seems endless, it's hard to really recognize how majorly important it is for it to have an ending point, to make an ending point, and that Katniss is telling herself this. Recently on a much smaller scale, but probably the most upset I've been in a long time was I made some plans to further my own mental health and move out, and those plans fell through. But at this point, I let myself really kind of fall into grief and anger, questioning how and why it happened. But I also told myself tomorrow, I'm going to see my boyfriend. We're going to go snowboarding. I'm going to feel better and I'm going to allow myself to be sad for today. But tomorrow it's going to be better. So I allowed myself time to grieve. And by then the next day I had a plan and a clear head. But that's a skill that I learned only after years of working on myself. So it's impressive that Katniss can do it here. And you can just tell that she's been through these motions, probably not only dealing with the loss of her father, but then also watching her mom struggle so much as she has. It's sad knowing that she's already developed so much to this point. It kind of hints as to how much she has suffered in the past, but it's also good because she has a job to do. She has to get through this to make her promise to Rue worthwhile. So if anyone is struggling with any kind of depression, disappointment, or negative emotion, just remember, it's okay to let yourself feel these things. It's okay to let go and feel the pain that you're feeling. And that's actually something I prevented myself from doing for a really long time. I would not let myself feel sad because I would always imagine it as a bottomless pit. But being able to really set yourself aside and saying, okay, I'm allowed to feel this way, it does allow for you to move on afterwards. You can allow yourself to move on after feeling this way. So same idea, getting basic necessities done the way Katniss does. Now you have to drink water, Katniss, page 240, drinking and eating to survive until the next day, just foundational steps to move through a dark time. Yeah, go Katniss. It's pretty tough, but she's doing good.
It's interesting that she's developed such a healthy internal voice. She doesn't tell herself, I shouldn't be here, I shouldn't be feeling this, I shouldn't be feeling this bad. She talks to herself in a very kind way, and I think that's important to recognize. Like, she is in the midst of the unhealthiest of circumstances. She has some quite healthy coping mechanisms.
Oh, yeah.
And also, like, that isn't always natural. Like, sometimes you need a therapist to get you to that point, and
Hey,
that's totally
I'm still
okay.
not at that point, so let's be honest.
In this scene, she's incredibly mature and incredibly self-aware.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think anybody has ever told her or talked with her about the way you speak to yourself, the way you talk to yourself in your own head. Like, and yet she has developed a healthy internal voice. So good on her. Like, I don't know how she did that.
Yeah, seriously. It's also interesting here after when the sun rises the next day, she's faced with the tomorrow that she was allowing herself, okay, tomorrow I have to snap out of it. I looked into, 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. As many people know, these 5 stages are usually either intermingled, they're usually not in a certain order, they can be felt at the same time or different times or in tandem with one another. So Katniss simultaneously starts going through anger and depression. But what's interesting is I think on page 241, she starts bargaining a little bit by taunting the careers to come and get her. It's not necessarily, I'll do this to bring her back. It's more along the lines of either I die or you die, and neither one of them is acceptable to me. She's combining her anger and grief into a bargaining chip, a motivation to bring down her enemy. And I think in this moment, she's the most dangerous she has ever been, but also her most vulnerable and foolish. I think if Kato had arrived and come to her at that point, she would have easily been killed because she would have been fighting out of anger without thought. Mm-hmm. And then stepping in again, this is the moment where the Mockingjay is born. She says, something happened when I was holding Rue's hand, watching the life drain out of her. Now I am determined to avenge her, to make her loss unforgettable, and I can only do that by winning and therefore making myself unforgettable. So the seeds of the rebellion and the Mockingjay have been sown. While initially Katniss takes on the games with a little bit of hope, but a small promise to Prim, she now has something much more important to drive her. Rue has taken the place of, in Katniss's mind eye, as her motivation, and the sole reason for her winning the games. So let's also talk about the fact that District 11 sent her some bread. This is the first time a district has sent someone food other than their own tribute. And District 11 is nearly as poor or just as poor as District 12. So the gift itself is more momentous than the book touches on. This is an exceedingly poor group of people who have lost their tribute, but are sending Katniss their food anyway. Is it a thank you, or is it more of that they feel the same anger and grief that Katniss does? And, sees the same kind of defiance in her that Rue did, and by hope that providing this little bit of kindling, they can start a flame. It's almost like, did District 11 actually start the rebellion? Indirectly, or perhaps intentionally. Yeah, they did. They're feeding into that act of defiance and just the way that Katniss has kind of barreled through and made her own path. And it's fuel for the fire, whether they meant for it to be or not.
Yeah, I think culturally and in the context of Panem, District 11 makes a lot of sense as the first rebel district because they have been beaten down and they have maintained a culture of hope even through that. Like how last time we were talking about the spirituals and the gospel songs, how those that were sung in the fields by slaves were about hope and about one day we will be free. So they were just itching for a rebellion, and this is their chance, and they're going to take it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what kickstarts her feelings of rebellion, is that District 11 says to her, it's time, and she answers the call.
This is also Katniss's first kill. She had never shot someone before.
Yeah, and in a weird turn of events, she realizes that it was kind of like Gale said, no different than killing an animal.
Yeah.
She feels bad a bit for the boy from District 1 because he must have had a family and friends who were expecting him to come home, probably expecting him back even more than Katniss's family expects her back because he's from a career district.
Exactly.
But she comes to the conclusion that Rue was worth it. So then we come to the rule change.
Oh, the rule change.
Yes, which is obviously meant to bring Peeta and Katniss back together because people are just itching for that lovey-dovey content. In the history of the games, there are no rules except for the unspoken no cannibalism. Mm-hmm. But here there's a change. There can be two tributes who win.
Mm-hmm. Provided that
they're both from the same district. And considering that there's only, at this point, I think one other pair who are from the same district and their careers, this is a big move. So, Katniss is going to set out and try to find Peeta, who's still somehow not dead from the wound Cato gave him. Here, we change from part 2 of the games to part 3, the victor. And that's the victor singular.
Yeah.
Which is kind of odd because we'd just been told there's going to be 2. So pretty much right after Claudius Templesmith makes that announcement, we know that the Capitol is going to go back on it and say there can only be one. Interesting foreshadowing. Mm-hmm. This is why we pay attention to titles and chapter titles. But at this point, I realized that the book has 3 parts, and the classic story structure is a 3-act structure. So, of course, it adheres to the 3-act structure. Duh. Oh, my goodness. I can't fathom why I didn't realize this before. So I'm going to kind of raise the same question that we debated in Twilight, which is, what is the climax of the Hunger Games? The 3-act structure has a very clear moment for the climax, and yet we've just had in chapter 18 a moment that is incredibly climactic for the entire series. It changes everything when Rue dies. So I want to outline this for you and see if you think that the climax is still to come or if it just happened. Act 1 includes an inciting incident and ends with the first plot point, which, quote, raises a dramatic question that will be answered in the climax of the film. So in Act 1, or Part 1, we set up the world of Panem. The reaping is the inciting incident, and Peeta's confession of love for Katniss is the first plot point that ends that part. And it raises the question, will they both survive? Act 2 contains rising action, confrontation, and character arc. So the games escalate, Katniss has her first kill, we learn about her as a person by how she responds to situations in the games, and it ends with the second plot point, which could either be Rue's death or the rule change. I think that it's the rule change because the rule change relates more directly to the dramatic question, will they both survive? And answers it with possibly, but also having that as the second plot point completely ignores Rue's death, which I think we can't ignore. So Act 3 is the resolution, and it includes the climax. We discussed in Twilight how the climax is the moment when everything changes, the moment when things can't go any other way. It's not necessarily the highest point in the book. It's not necessarily the most action-driven point in the book. It's just the point when things change for good. So what is the climax of the Hunger Games? Is it Rue's death because that's the catalyst of the rebellion in District 11 and the moment that Katniss solidifies her need to rebel against the Capitol's vicious ways? Or is it in Act 3 when she and Peeta both survive and they kill Cato together and they're marked permanently as rebels? So that was just something that kind of wormed its way into my head as we were going, and that's a 3-act story structure.
I almost wonder, is it the moment when the gamekeepers announce that 2 people can win? Because that's when Katniss goes to find Peeta and they join up together. Because eventually they do go back on it and they say, just kidding, we can't. But that's like the moment that kind of sets the forward motion of the next act of the book. So I almost wonder if the reason why she left off here is because that is the climax. That is where everything changes.
I think that would make more sense as the second plot point, though. Because, I mean, with the 3-act structure, the climax is in Act 3. Mm-hmm. I mean, it would have to be when they're both about to eat the berries and die together in the arena, and then Claudius Temple-Smith says, no, actually, you can both live. This is fine. Because that does change the rest of the series.
Yeah.
This is kind of just like a little bit of hope feeding into and leading up to the climax. But also I feel kind of bad that Rue's death isn't the climax because that's definitely when things change for Katniss.
Definitely. We see it throughout the rest of the series.
I mean, everybody keeps bringing up Rue again in Catching Fire when Peeta draws her on the floor for the game makers for his private session, like on the Victory Tour and after that, and it's always going back to Rue because that was the defining moment for Katniss and for, by extension, the rest of the rebels. I don't know if this story is designed to specifically adhere to the 3-act structure and if that is specifically why these points were chosen for the different parts. I think it would make sense, but also I don't want to ignore Rue's death in Act 2.
Right.
So yeah, that's chapter 18.
Happy living.
Happy living.
Obviously this is a really scary time for everybody. So I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy and recognizing that this is a pretty dire situation to be in as a world. So, stay safe, stay smart, and wishing everybody well over here.
We're going to try to stick to the 2-week schedule. We did take a longer break than, we could have had an episode 2 weeks ago because you did come back earlier from Maryland, but also the world was in chaos and our minds
that's when
were
shit
in chaos.
hit the fan. Yeah.
So I think we're better off for having taken a 4-week break rather than a 2-week break.
Yeah.
But we're going to try to be consistent going forward with the 2-week schedule. But also, a lot of things are up in the air.
Right.
Like, you're working from home. I don't have a job anymore. And who knows when this whole lockdown thing is going to be over.
Tweet us if you think Lydia should move to Colorado.
Yeah, until then, you can find us on Twitter at Let's Unpack Pod. Email us at doitforthevamps@gmail.com. And we are on SoundCloud, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, iTunes. I haven't done any research on how to get us on Spotify, but maybe I will this time.
And we're also now on TikTok at Literary Lids.
Yeah, and I'm on TikTok. I'm TikTok famous. Woot woot.
Yeah, you are.
This is what I get for making sourdough starter in a time of pandemic.
Yep.
And recording it and posting it on TikTok. So yes, stay safe, stay inside, appreciate your local grocery workers and essential workers and health care professionals because they're absolutely overworked and, in a lot of cases, underpaid.
Hey, thanks for listening, guys. See you soon.
Let's get this bread.
Let's get this bread.